Okay, temperature. So in the last video, we talked about our hardiness zones, and that's really going to be where your plants can survive frost-wise. How cold does it get, and will your plant die over winter? So primarily your hardiness zone is just going to tell you what can survive over the winter in your given location. So daily seasonal temperate fluctuations will kind of tell you, especially this hardiness zone, will tell you when your seeds should be sown after the last frost. Well, it's really hard to know that because you don't know if it's going to frost again. But there typically is a frost-free date in which the odds of it freezing are very low, and you really want to plant your seeds before that. I mean, after that. You don't want to plant your seeds before that because their little shoots are going to come out and they're going to get frozen off. The last spring frosts damage spring flowering perennials such as fruit crops, and this will happen. You'll see if there's like a late frost, this will be a panic for like peach trees and things like that are not prepared. Plants usually have a temperature related growth pattern. So minimum, they're alive, but they're not growing very much. They're not dying. You haven't killed it with frost, essentially. Optimal, so your peach tree, right, it can grow. It can't grow past 30. That's bad. But somewhere around, let's say, 35 to 50, it can grow. It's going to have very slow growth. Optimally, it wants to be between 55 and about 80, 85. That's going to be where it grows its best. And then the maximum is, it's just going to cause injury because it's too hot when it gets past 100 degrees. It's just not going to do very well. And you can see different plants. Obviously, your subtropical plants, they can just go forever. There is no too hot for them. But your warm temperate, all of these plants that we grow here, you're going to see them at about 30, 35 degrees. This is where you get into the late 90s and the early, 95, 102. They don't like it. They don't grow very well. So when you see these sort of frost advisories, simple protective coverings for heat retention. So this is everybody goes out and basically covers their plants with blankets or tarps or things like that. It's going to retain the soil temperature and retain the plant heat and hopefully not cause any frost damage. Some, obviously, greenhouse systems are prepared for this kind of thing. The presence of a large building, very often there'll be a wind protection, large fans for temperature inversion. You'll see them try and keep the heat down because heat rises. So you'll see the fans, and basically what they're trying to do is push the hot air down. They will also spray water on the plants, which seems counterintuitive because if I sprayed water on you, it would make you very cold. But essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to freeze the water, which will create a protective warm barrier on the inside. That is why they are doing that. Okay, globally and locally, you have wind belts and precipitation patterns, and that is what the weatherman tells you about all the time, what wind patterns we're in and how that is cold air coming from Canada, is warm air coming from South America, what is happening. The large land masses create these patterns, and they're especially noticeable in weather in spring and autumn when it's cold, it's hot, it's cold, it's hot. And this is essentially what's doing this. You have your westerlies, you have your polar air, you have trade winds, you have evaporation, and it's just like, here's the rainforest, here's the desert, we're more of a temperate forest and what's going on there. So that is a little bit of what the weatherman is talking to you about every night. Now, if you are in agriculture or horticulture or plants in general, you are going to watch the weather guy like your life depends on it, because your livelihood actually does depend on you knowing exactly what's going on with the weather. So you will know about the westerlies and the trade winds and what's going on. Air movement is modified by bodies of water, onshore, offshore. This doesn't affect us as much because we're not close to an ocean. Air movement decreases relative humidity. Relative humidity, you know this, right? The worst days, and I mean the worst. It's July. It's 98 degrees, and there is no wind, and it is just disgusting outside. And a slight breeze, right? It changes your life. Like one slight breeze, and you're like, oh, I will survive. So you know that a good breeze will decrease that really gross humidity that you get into. Sometimes the air movement is too much, right? It can damage your crops. It can knock them right over, knock their stems over. It contributes to soil erosion. And it does contribute to other kinds of erosion as well. It can be modified by windbreaks, so you can put up some windbreaks to decrease the velocity of wind, and that happens here. Places that have natural forests do not understand why we do this, but if you drive through, especially northern Illinois, you will see that they have planted windbreaks so the wind doesn't get quite so nasty. And that was one of the problems this summer. We had, everyone was planting and there was wind and it shut down areas of 55 going north. Air movement within plant canopies is generally slower than outside the canopies. The thicker the line, the faster the air movement. So you're not going to get as much movement down here and in here as you would over, but it does slow down the wind and it helps to protect the plants from wind damage. Here's the atmospheric composition. It's about 78% nitrogen. You've got about 20% oxygen, 0.41% carbon dioxide, and the rest of it is all other gases, assorted gases. Total nitrogen, most of it is in the atmosphere, some of it is in rocks and soil, and some of it is in organisms. Oxygen is produced by plants and algae through photosynthesis. We know this. Carbon dioxide produced by you. There's a small amount in the atmosphere, and we are producing it by, lots of other things, mostly burning those fossil fuels. Increasing at a rapid rate, mainly from fossil fuels. We can only plant so much to reduce this. At some point, it's going to be a losing game because we just can't plant that many plants as fossil fuels increase exponentially. Here's the rising, the up and down of the CO2, and here is just the median going across there. Carbon dioxide raising rates and warmer temperatures suggest better crop production at higher altitudes, depending on having enough precipitation and nutrients and other things critical to plant growth, such as light. So you might be able to grow things temperature-wise farther north, but you're probably still going to not be able to grow cotton in North Dakota because there's not enough light. The season is not long enough light-wise. Maybe temperature-wise, you can grow something longer, but light-wise, remember, so many things are photoperiod sensitive that's why we've not moved a lot of crops around. Better crop growth would remove more CO2. This is probably not likely as plants have to hold CO2 for a long time to be effective, and crop CO2 is released upon consumption. So other gases. So ethylene contributes to global warming, plant hormone. It can have a positive or negative effect on plants. So the positive effect is it tends to ripen fruit. This is why if you put one bad apple spoils the batch, that apple produces ethylene and it overly ripens all the rest of the apples. So it can ripen it, which is good if you want your fruit to be ripe. It also negatively the leaf can fall off, the fruit can fall off. It, increases the odds of your leaf falling off and desiccating. Particles also contribute to the atmosphere, such as dust, ash, spores, our friend pollen. So dust actually does prevent some photosynthesis. It prevents the stomata from opening, which is not awesome. And it contributes to shading the plant so they don't get as much good photosynthesis. So dust is not great. Okay, that's it. Have a good one.